what does it do to offer this to a new customer? What does it do to help existing customers? And I'm just, in my life, so pet peeve is, I was with Cellular One. I mean, I've been with the same company all the way through. They typically wouldn't do anything for you, an existing a loyal existing customer forever, but they give the farm away to get somebody new. And I'm looking at this the same, in kind of the same thing. I mean, I had Comcast since Lowell no longer had sold to Comcast. You know, what can you do for me? The rates keep going up, yada. There's no promotions for you. So you go to their competitor, you know, and then they go, oh, well, you really gonna leave? Oh, we can do this for you, or we can do that. So I need to know, bring in more, giving incentive, an economic development rate for companies that come in. What will that eventually do, or how will that help our existing customers if we're not giving our existing customers a break?
Those are excellent points. And you know, first of all, this is a little different. We are actually giving a rate reduction, but that's not the purpose for this. You know, I agree with every word that you said. You know, and the other thing that always concerns me about economic development rate is that, I always hate the word widgets, but let's say you have a company that produces widgets and they pay your full rate tariff, they've been a loyal customer for 20 years, and then you attract another customer that produces widgets and you give them a discount, making your existing customer potentially less competitive. Those are things that always concern me. Now I will say that, and I've developed literally hundreds of these rates for utilities. One time, that scenario I just said happened. It wasn't widgets, but and what the utility did is they went to the customers. Kind of surprising. They went to the existing customer and said, "This is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think about it? It's good for the community, and we're giving them a discount of 25-30%, whatever it was, for the first couple of years." And that existing customer, the management said, "I'm okay with it." I don't know why. I would have been probably a little bit, but I think he was trying to say, okay, it's right for the community. It's probably the perspective he was looking at it from. And you know, when times are good, maybe this rate's not needed. But when times aren't so good and jobs are needed, and that always happens, like it did in 2009 and 10, this is another tool that you have. It doesn't mean you have to use it. It doesn't mean you have to offer it. Although there is risk in, actually there's risk in approving the policy, if your concern is that, because if you approve that policy, the way it's written, anybody who meets the criteria, you have to offer it to them. Anybody who meets the criteria. Unless you put more certain restrictions in that policy. But you have to be careful with those restrictions. Like I said, anybody who meets the criteria of that policy, you have to give it to them. And, you know, so, you know, there's good and bad to having this rate. And I'm here to do the calculation and tell you both sides of it. Prior to 2009, we would do some of these different areas of the country, different areas of the state that wanted to promote growth, irrespective of other factors. You know, after 2010, it became so important to promote growth, promote jobs, that they were willing to take on those risks for the existing customers to use this to try to entice jobs. And like I said, if you have serious concerns, I would not approve that policy tonight.
One thing I do want to say though, after it sunsets, the fixed cost contribution is now spread out over more customers and everybody will see a decrease. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
Zealand, for example, I just know Zealand, I know Bill, and I'm from there. They have such large industry. And they have the cheapest electric rates, I think, in the Midwest, because they have such large industrial customers that they're able to spread out all of their fixed costs over. So it's hard to understand that, but if you look at it on a macro scale over potentially decades of time, growth is good for everyone.
Yeah.
In the
that's a
short
good point.
run, somebody might not understand that, but costs do go down if we do have growth.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep, there would be.
Let's-
That's how I was gonna make a point.
That
there.
will, it will keep costs down for everybody else,
But yeah, next year you might not see it, but
eventually.
over time, it should happen if you're able to use this and attract business.
Can I put you on the
Yep.
spot, Jeff? You're a business owner here in town. What, how do you feel about an economic development rate?
I think if it brings new business into town, it's good with it all year round. And it wouldn't bother me that stuff.
And for one, it brings in additional tax revenue, so there's other benefits to the community besides just the electric consumers. But even in the example you mentioned, where it's a direct competitor that might be coming in, I read somewhere about how a lot of companies actually like that because it increases the quality of the talent pool, you know, and so then, and it kind of creates a larger industry of their expertise within that community. And so then it attracts the higher talent to come in and
And I don't have a preference one way or another. Mark was doing all these studies for us. It was an action item before I arrived, or I took my position as general manager, and it was an action item as we went through strategic planning, and thought now would be the right time to at least have the study done while Mark was here. So it truly is probably a board decision for the community.
Is this an RP3 requirement?
So what's the difference between the 5-year and 3-year? Like, do they have the same net effect, or?
No, it's basically the board, the choice, if you wanted to do it over the 5-year period or do it over 3 years. The 5-year period probably gives you a little bit more economic incentive, a little bit, to bring industry in than the 3-year would. But we see this rate structured in different ways, so I want to give you those options.
So does the chamber or the city have any kind of economic development plan?
I'm not sure.
Ask the council rep.
Really been wondering.
I'm just kidding.
Did you find that out for us,
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Councilman?
did, actually. I think that, yeah, Mike Burns had established the economic development plan, and there may be, we see a lot of growth on the east end of town, for instance. And I don't know if that's organic or if that's come out of the economic plan that the city has actually developed. But I think this would be one step for this board to encourage the city council and the city manager to move in that direction.
And make this part of it. And make this part of the economical plan when you're
Right.
soliciting
The
or
question
whatever it
I'm-
might be.
I mean, I have a lot of questions, but whether to adopt a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, again, I was wondering what,
I mean, we could always think about it too, and Mark's
Right.
presented it, and we can bring it back at a later meeting after you've thought about it for a month.
I personally would like to see it just put it on our agenda for the next meeting to approve, but I guess I'd like to not be the lone cowboy and,
Will that give us time for Marty to do some research for us, to bring it back and talk about what is that economical thing for the city and what they're looking at doing and how this contributes to it?
and that's
I
my,
think-
I'm okay
I
with
think
that,
that'd
yeah.
be useful just to align it with what the city and is trying to do. I mean, maybe they've got a different timescale in mind, or
Or do you bring Mike Burns in to address it?
potentially.
So,
I guess the one question I had is could too many people take advantage of this that makes it not worth it anymore? Like, let's say all of a sudden we had 20 new large, customers say, hey, we're going to do this. Does that suddenly push that, erode that fixed cost, so much, or that now it's not becoming useful to us, or
Puts a burden on low.
or is it just a short-term burden
Well,
that?
that's why the next thing is the line extension policy that we'll talk about, to make sure exactly what you're saying doesn't happen. So if somebody comes in and, let's say you do it for one industry, okay, 2, okay, 3, okay, all of a sudden you get to the 5th, my substations on my sub-transmission facility now needs to be enlarged. Well, now that becomes part of the expense related to line extension, because we have to add another transformer. So that's why the line extension policy is a good thing to have, especially in conjunction with economic development rate, because it prevents exactly from what you're saying from happening. Because if there is any incremental cost associated with serving that new load, they're going to have to pay it. So,
But
because
then-
we'll only pay so much.
Mhm.
So that helps to protect the system. It helps to protect the existing ratepayers, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We want growth to occur, obviously, but not in a manner that harms existing ratepayers.
So then, in other words, any company would have to potentially have a little more capital to make it happen, but then they would see the benefit from having basically better cash flow for 3 or 5 years. That makes it worth it for them.
So I'd like to move on, maybe still in this meeting, come back and visit C, but I think what you're talking about is the contribution for line extension policy would then maybe enlighten us what could be the negatives of positive or negatives of the economic development rate.
It would be more related to protecting the system up against the economic having
Too many
too
all at
many,
once.
which, believe me, I've never seen it happen, but I mean, potentially.
We're different out here. It can happen, it can happen.
Yeah, if it's gonna happen anyway.
Come on, baby.
All of a sudden, Lowell becomes the size of Grand Rapids.
Well, I'll make a motion, we put a hold on economic development rate and come back to it later on today.
I don't think we need a motion. Just
I don't think
Okay,
we need a
all right.
motion.
Just,
we'll just talk about it after
Consensus.
we talk about the fixed costs. Is that the idea, Perry?
yeah,
Regarding the
Or
line.
not the fixed cost, the line extension.
Yeah, and regarding the line extension policy, and again, I included this in the memo in your packet, we currently do have a line extension policy. Tom knows full well that we do, and as nice as I can say it, the last time it was developed was 2009, and I don't know how or the rationale why it got updated to 2015 to what it is, but based on Mark's calculations, the current dollar amounts that we have in that policy are significantly out of line. So regardless of the economic development rate, I do think it's very important to take Mark pretty seriously on this and strongly consider updating our current policy to what Mark's going to recommend tonight. So Mark, to you.
Okay, great. I'm going to start this, and I know we're kind of limited in time, but I want to start by telling a story. When I was with the Holland Board of Public Works, we had a strip mall going on, or Walmart, and it was quite a large strip mall. And the developer was building it. They weren't paying the electric rates, and they had a choice between us and Consumers Energy. And the way our policy was written at the time, it said that we will provide up to 5 times the potential revenue of the facility. However, we had to charge the difference between underground and overhead service, which amounted to $35,000. Consumers Energy came in and said, we won't charge you anything. We want that growth, we want that load. The developer, even though our rates are 15% less, the developer said, heck, we'll go with consumers. So, but I looked at this and went, we are crazy to lose this load. We'll recover that $35,000 in 2.5 months. and we're gonna lose this load because of our policy. So I talked to the general manager, and we, believe it or not, a municipality did this. We changed our policy, something very similar to this, it was very rudimentary at the time, within a week. We got it approved by city council, and we got that customer. And after that time, I thought we were the only creative utility in the country that did this kind of stuff. When I got to be the consultant, I realized, no, we're not. Memphis does something similar, Tennessee, as far as the municipal side. A lot of investor-owned utilities had policies that looked at how much are we willing to invest in a manner that is not going to harm our existing ratepayers, and from an investor-owned utility standpoint, not going to reduce what we can pay to our shareholders. All right. So the incentive was different. So, but anyway, we started doing a lot of these. This is back in the late 90s. And I've probably done it for about 150 utilities around the country. Different forms of what I'm going to show you now. But the ultimate objective is when a new customer comes on, we want to identify how much can we contribute where it does not harm our existing ratepayers. But we're being fair to this new customer. Where is that break point? That's what this policy in the development of it looked at. So again, we're trying to identify what we will contribute. And by doing that, it subsequently identifies what the new customer will pay. For example, if the extension costs $10,000 and this line extension policy calculation says we're only willing to pay $4,000, then the customer has to pay $6,000. Okay? So they pay the differential above it. So ultimately, we're trying to make sure on this slide that it's the third bullet really, that the investment will not harm our existing ratepayers and it's good for everybody. That's ultimately what we're after. But to do this, we have to look at the contribution margin, the same as economic development. What is the contribution margin toward fixed cost recovery that we are going to get from a new customer, which then drives what our investment will be. However, it's not the same for everybody, which is because of risk. And I'm going to talk about risk, which on the surface is probably something a lot of municipals are not used to dealing with in a sense. But risk comes into play when it comes to customers, because types of customers. Because with residential customers, if you extend service to them, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to have sales to them for the next 50 to 100 years. And if the home burns down, they'd probably rebuild it on the site. So the risk is relatively low. When it comes to commercial, like small restaurants, excuse me, the risk is a little bit greater because you have the risk of bankruptcy, you have the risk of the homeowner passing away or retiring, and that building sitting vacant for 6 months or a year, and before somebody buys it, you start getting sales again. So the risk is greater than it is for residential, but it's not as great as industrial customers, because if you extend service to a large industrial customer, and if they go into bankruptcy, or if the line gets moved, chances are nobody will ever use that building again. And I know it sounds strange, but talk to Lansing and that mile-long GM plant. They moved the production line with bulldozers. Go to Holland and look at the General Electric plant that we used to have that shut down in the early 80s. And nobody ever used that building. 10 years later, it was demolished. I mean, it's, so the risk is greater serving large industrial customers than it is residential. So what we did, and these are kind of standard assumptions that we've used, and reviewed them numerous times with different boards. Sometimes you tweak them, but most of the times they're the same. But the one major assumption is this: recovery period. We use the same net present value number for all of these, which is your rate of return, and then 6%. But the recovery periods we varied. So we're saying we're willing to give up our fixed cost recovery for 7 years on residential, in this line extension calculation. So we're willing to pay, based on this, 16.37 cents for every kilowatt hour of additional residential sales we get. For general service, we brought that down to 5-year recovery. So our recovery period is 5 years. And we're willing to invest about 15.8 cents. When it comes to these larger customers, it's a little different. We brought the recovery period down to 3 years. And you'll also see that we're not showing it on a per kilowatt hour basis anymore. We're showing it on a KW, which is actually more accurate. But we don't have the demand on these customers, so we can't do it that way. So it varies by customer type a little bit, but it's anywhere from $22 to $26 per annual KW. And we'll actually show you how the calculation works. But before I get that, I want to show you how we actually put the policy together. We took that 16 cents for the residential, and we multiplied it by the annual kilowatt hour sales. Okay, it'd be 600 times 12. 600 annual kilowatt hour, monthly kilowatt hours times 12. And it said that we should pay $1,237 toward the extension of service to a new customer. If it costs $2,000, the customer pays the difference. So we pay up to the $1,200. Now, when it comes to subdivisions like developments, it's a little bit different because the recovery period now changes, because when a developer comes in, typically what happens is they say, okay, we're going to put in a 100-lot development. And so they ask the utility to come in and run the electric loop, in a sense, around the subdivision. And then they start selling the lots. The lots may take 3 or 5 years before they're fully built out, sometimes longer. So we have to bring our maximum investment per lot down. So if we assume 3 years is a recovery period, then, or 3 years they'll be fully in place, then we're willing to pay about $1,000 per lot. If we assume the subdivision is going to take 5 years to be fully developed, it's $842 per lot. So if a developer comes in with a 100-lot subdivision, and we think it's going to take 5 years to develop it out, we're willing to pay $84,200. Anything above that, they have to pay the difference on the extension from that substation throughout the subdivision. Okay. By doing that, it protects the existing ratepayers. Now, when it comes to general service, it's because there's so much variation. Residential, we try to treat it like a homogeneous class, so just say $1,200, simplified. General service, we can't really do that because there's too much variation. So about 16 cents per kilowatt hour we're willing to pay times the annual projected kilowatt hour sales from this customer. So if we project 10,000 kilowatt hours is the projected sales from this customer annually, then we're willing to invest $1,578. If it's 100,000 kilowatt hours, because it could be, probably not, then it would be $15,780 we're willing to invest. So you see how this works? Mm-hmm. That's an actual calculation. These are hard numbers. When it comes to general service class, in 222 and these other ones are a little bit different, but now these customers are demand metered. And if we entice a customer with our economic development of 1,000 kW monthly demand, which is $12,000 kW annually. 12,000 times $22. What would that be? Quite a bit. 240,000. would be what we'd be willing to invest. And again, that's the point at which our existing ratepayers are protected. Any cost above that, they have to pay. And believe me, when you get into large customers, like 1,000 kW can be substantial expense. So our portion is limited. And that's how this line extension works. It protects the existing ratepayers. It's more fair to the new customers. It's not arbitrary. It's not looking and throwing at a dartboard. You don't know how many times I've looked at line extension policies throughout the country that have no basis in anything. I've worked for utilities that pay 100% of everything. I've seen them spend $15,000, $16,000 to extend service to a residential. They can't understand why the rates are so high. You know, and I've seen utilities that make them pay 100% of everything for the new customers. And you think to yourself, wow, you're really creating these barrier to growth in the community by doing that. And because now, in a sense, they're subsidizing the existing ratepayers with that growth. This balances it out. Now, what I did do, and mainly after these general service customers, I want them to sign a 5-year contract. I would have this, you know, to have a 5-year contract signed because we don't want them to come in. We make this investment of $220,000, and 3 years later, they go into bankruptcy and we're left holding the bag. So we have, this recovery, we need to have them sign a contract for 5 years if they're going to stay with us. They're not going to move their operation, but they're going to stay with us for 5 years.
So how do we estimate the, I guess, the annual kilowatt hours of a customer? Because I mean, it seems like it can vary quite a bit depending.
It can, and this is something that, okay, this is my recommendation with that. For residential, you're at low risk. Even the general service, you're at low risk. I mean, it's not going to affect. But when you get into these large customers, it can be substantial. If it's a 100 kW a month customer and you're estimating it, okay, that's within the risk level. But you used to get into 1,000 kW, the $250,000, that's a different level of risk. And so rather than estimating the kilowatt hours, you can do one of two things. You can either true it up after 3 years. So if your estimate was $12,000 a year and they only use 10, then they're going to pay the additional amount. If they actually use $14,000 a month during the year, you're going to actually be cutting them a check. The other way of doing it, now you usually only do this when it's really, really substantial. For example, the Trans-Canada Pipeline, not the one they're currently building, but the one they built in 2008, went through a lot of these smaller public power districts, and these are huge investments. And I didn't want to put at risk this small utilities ratepayers for this large investment in the pipeline. So what I did, I told the pipeline that you pay 100% of the extension cost, 100%, and then we will rebate you our portion of this $24 based on your actual usage every month. So we did a calculation that actually reduced their bill for the first 3 years based on their actual usage. So there's different ways of going about doing it. But again, it depends on the point at which you feel the risk is too great. The engineering department, they'd have to estimate the usage. Like I said, if it's a small customer, no big deal. If it's a large customer, then maybe they want to do some sort of true-up. So.
I guess the other question I just have is what's the difference between the measuring by kilowatt versus kilowatt hour? Like why do we, maybe that's more a question for Ryan.
Great question. KW, kilowatt, is the peak demand that a customer creates in any month. So if you have, let's say, a Walmart, and a Walmart maybe has a peak demand of 500 kW, and the meters record that, their kilowatt hour consumption, that's the way I probably can't do the math. Yeah.
It's the integration into that.
It's the integration of that.
So you're saying at that level, we're charging more by their capacity to meet their peak demand versus by their actual usage.
And the reason for that is the distribution recovery is in the demand charge. Because we size the distribution system to handle the demand, so we try to put in the demand charge. I know some of it's intermixed, we're not perfect with cost of service, but that in general is what we're striving to do.
So they're putting more of a strain on our system by virtue of the high peak demand than by the actual consumption of electricity.
And that's how we build it.
Okay.
So that's that load factor graph.
Yeah.
They have low load factor. If you look at their average rate per kilowatt hour, it's a lot higher. It might be 20 cents. If they're at 20% load factor, because they have this peak demand, but they don't use a lot of kilowatt hours. But the way the rate is structured, demand and energy, if you look at an average cost per kilowatt hour basis, it's within your own rates. It could be like 20 cents a kilowatt hour. You get to a high load factor customer where they create the same demand, but they run it 24 hours a day. Their average cost might be 7 cents a kilowatt hour. It's all really related to how they use the facilities you're providing to them. And this is kind of doing the same thing.
Okay. So really what this is doing is just kind of determining the return on investment, so to speak. If we were to invest this much money in an extension, it would come back to us in 7 years for residential or in 3 years for the higher category.
That's correct. No different than how an investor owned utility would do it, other than our discount rate is a lot lower because we're not for profit. So we're not in the business to make money, just to protect our ratepayers.
Right. So it's just basically it's the return on investment is the return on the like upgrade or whatever of our facility and infrastructure.
Yeah, it's the inflationary increase in the assets replacement cost is how we define it.
Okay. Yep. That's a much better way of saying that.
Question for you, Steve, before we go on with this. So I'm looking in my packet, and it says proposed policy, objectives to provide a method by which low light power will extend electric lines, yada, yada, yada. And if I go down, I'm looking at that, and DA, so I'm looking at residential RS 121, which is 1,237. Okay,
What page are you on, Terry?
I don't know.
Just on the right side as you scroll. There should be a little tab on the right. If you're in. Oh, it's a different program you're in. Okay.
So then it says residential development 3 years, it says $592 per lot.
It should be these numbers.
And it says
Yeah.
residential RS 121.
No, that's why I tried to go open the new board packet for you,
Okay,
but that's the one that didn't open. This was the slide that was incorrect.
okay.
This is the policy that he resent me, but it didn't open for Marty, that's why.
And it didn't open for me.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
He sent me
So
the,
again, electronics and I just don't.
but you can believe his numbers.
Okay, well, I'm
Yeah, that's a fair
reading this,
question.
I'm
Oh,
going,
page
if we're
55,
approving the
just like
policy that's written here, I want to
rest of
make
us.
sure we're not,
Right.
What did you
Good question.
okay. Well, they're all good.
Well, I know.
I could show you.
Great point.
Okay, with
Okay, so
the,
you're talking about the DEA of the allowable construction credits
Yeah.
thing? Okay.
and this is what, when I call, this is what I've got.
Okay.
You have the right one
because
open?
Yeah.
Because the
Did
new
yours
one,
match?
because the new,
Yeah, so
the
page
new one won't
55 of
load.
the
Yeah.
of the new packet.
Right.
It wouldn't load on yours either, right? Okay, I'm not alone.
Yeah, so those all match.
You're not alone.
There we go.
Most of yours
Yes.
is different.
Okay, any other questions?
This one has the right numbers in it.
Oh, so your
Yeah, it's right here.
Then
says different numbers.
I would entertain a motion to adopt the low light and power contribution, contribution for line extension policy.
I'd like to motion to adopt, for the adoption of the LLP contribution for line extension policy.
And I'll support.
Okay, it's been moved and supported. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, 4-0.
All right.
So then,
The economic development rate,
Yeah.
are we gonna decide to put that on hold then?
I personally would like to just talk to have you talk to the city, see where they are, and see where the chamber is, so that we can then approve that. I mean, I think it's good to approve that, but I would like to know, are we looking at a 5-year plan? Are we looking at a 3-year plan?
Okay.
Those types of things.
Would it make sense to vary those based on the type of customer? Kind of
Yeah.
like the 7, 5, 3 year?
What utilities have done, we've done it different ways, is they've stratified it. Like, for example, a customer's projected peak demand is 500 kW. They might use the 3-year. And if they're over 500, they might use the 5-year. They'll usually have a threshold. That's one way of doing it. Now, when I work for city managers, they like to put another component in, which, I mean, I was a little hesitant, but I understand it. They'll put a jobs factor in it.
Oh,
So if you're willing, if it's a company that's gonna add this amount of jobs, and, but the problem I have with that is, that doesn't mean it's gonna be beneficial to the electric utility. So that's why I'm hesitant to do that. But we are public power, so we're gonna do what's best interest of the community. But that's one thing you could do. Either that or just say everybody's at 5 years, or everybody's at 3 years, and just simplify the policy in that manner.
well, I think it makes sense to, like Perry was saying, discuss it, see how it aligns with the city and plans, but also give us time to kind of look at that quote-unquote return on investment, or the phrase that he used that's more accurate. Because that was one of the questions I had was, well, how do we pick 5 or 3 years? It's like it depends on the size and the load and all that. So that'd be the other part I think we probably want to look at is aligning that. And I guess maybe even one way to look at it would be aligning it with the extension policy to some extent. Maybe not. I don't know. That's my thought.
Okay, so there's clearly, I think there's some questions that we all have a little bit, and they might be just, now that we've had the discussion and had the presentation, we can go back and be able to make a more informed decision at our next meeting.
Definitely.
Okay, so do you want me to ask Mike?
I've had like very high level conversations about the idea of light and power really being used as a tool for the city to attract business or development. How that happens, I haven't gone into that detail. I just thought, hey, this is a natural thing that we can do. That's a tool in their tool bag, kind of like Jeff said. But over the next month, I can definitely talk with Mike in detail about what we're thinking about doing and how they could use that, or the chamber could use that.
And have it on our agenda for next month for approval or
Sure.
non-approval, whichever.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that's it, Mark.
I think we've got a lot, I appreciate it. We've
Yeah,
got
thanks,
a lot of
Warren.
stuff done tonight. Thank
What's
you
the,
so
what's
much.
the F there?
Yeah, what
Or
is?
what's E and F?
That does not relate to Mark.
Okay.
Okay.
Mark's job is done, and if you want to stay, you can, but it could be a
Oh
little
my
bit.
God, Mark. Run, Mark, while you can.
New Union is a nice place to stop
For a root beer, right?
for a root beer.
Yeah.
No, birch beer.
A birch bear now, okay, okay, okay.
You know, I went,
Non-alcoholic
birch beer.
I went to Universal Studios in Orlando back in June at the National Conference. Had a butterbeer.
We're actually gonna take a 10-minute break and use the
You ever heard of
restroom.
Harry
Okay.
Potter?
Let's go 5 minutes.
Okay.
Nope.